Hi, my name is Gil Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association. Today, we're excited to have fellows who are responsible for the hot TV show, Sherman Showcase. We're going to kick things off by introducing you to the AAFCA members who are on the call today, starting with our facilitator, Katia Woods in Philadelphia, Jill Monroe in Los Angeles, Dana Abercrombie in New York, and Nancy Green in Baltimore. I'm going to let you ladies do what you do all so well, and I'll see you on the other side.
One of the stars of Sherman's Showcase, Sherman McDaniels, is here.
Hold on, wait, one of.
Worms! Outrageous! Hey, this looks like it's made from elephants.
We just want to thank God. Y'all really gonna boo God for real?
Hi, Iman. You're welcome for having me.
Glad we see eye to eye on this. I went for something understated.
You shied.
Hey, I'll be a disco ball.
Yes, we could hang you upside down and spin you around.
I don't think you should be talking about hanging black people, David.
Hi, Jill Monroe, Access to the Life. Great to talk to you both today. So with season 2 coming up, there's been a little break between the 2 seasons. We've had the specials, the Juneteenth, one of my personal favorites. So I want to know, going into this, what was your thought process? Were there any concerns about some of the skits maybe losing their freshness because of the wait, and how you approached that and opted to sort of reconcile all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we went into it knowing that there was the chance. Once we knew that we weren't shooting when we intended to, we knew that a certain percentage of the sketches were going to go away. And so I don't know what the percent is. It might be actually as high as 60%, but we definitely wrote a largely new season once we got back in the writer's room, after people started getting their COVID shots and pulling their, started pulling together again. So we ended up with a situation where, we definitely rewrote at least half the season, if not a little bit more so.
Also, I think, one of the things about our show is Dion and I used to be writers on Jimmy Fallon. And I think the charge there was, what's in the news cycle? What are we looking at? What are we making fun of? It's a daily show. You got to be fresh. You're competing with the internet. For our sketch comedy show, and it's part of the reason why our format is sort of a variety format, which is more timeless and more, probably a little more anachronistic. We really try to write stuff that can perform, no matter when it airs. And also, oftentimes that means writing about bigger things. Here's an example. We wrote this sketch, and this has actually happened twice on the show. We wrote this sketch about, Diddy and his artist beefing over money. And we just was, really funny. And it was something that, it's one of those things, it's like, whether or not it's true, it's definitely something people have talked about. And so we felt like, okay, that's something that, we've heard, we've talked about, and we can have some silly fun with it. And it just so happens that last week, there was a whole thing about, about Diddy and I think one of his artists talking about money stuff. So for us, we do get lucky sometimes. We write something that is really just sort of evergreen, and then it ends up being able to hit no matter when it airs. We did that. We did that even with our special, where we did this whole thing about, kente cloth, and then it turns out that the members of Congress started wearing kente cloth with this photo op. So again, sometimes by focusing on doing stuff that's timeless, we end up still kind of getting lucky and doing stuff that actually ends up being in the news cycle. But our goal is always, let's write something that doesn't pertain necessarily to one news story, because we're not a daily show. We have a much higher bar in terms of like trying to write stuff that just can play 10 years from now, 20 years from now.
Thank you so much for that. Mace's one book sale. Facts.
Oh, man. I see this is the Keep It 100 podcast. All right, let's just go forward.
Hi, I'm Nancy Green with Film Critique. And it's funny that you mentioned that that skit. I was actually wondering about those things when you do skits more about some of the more famous people, do you ever worry about the feedback that you might receive?
We think that everybody can kind of take a joke in general. It's funny because when we've made jokes about Montel Williams and Chameleon Air, we thought, oh man, they ain't gonna be happy. But then they were some of the very people who were like, yo, I think this is hilarious. So I think that one thing about Diddy is that I feel like for years people have made these accusations. So sort of like what Bashir said, we're not saying that they're true or not, but there's definitely like sort of an evergreen sketch there. And so we felt like in our writer's room, we had just come off of doing a sketch in season 1 called Temptations 11, which was a play on Ocean's 11. And, it was one of our most well-received sketches. So we were like, is there a Diddy updated version of this one? So we called on some of our favorite actors. You've got everybody from Brescia Webb to Amanda Seales, to Chandra Russell, who, one of the huge stars of Southside. We pulled in all these people who we thought were really, really funny. And we were like, let's just go to town. Let's show all the bad boy artists, trying to get their money back. Because, Sherman's exists, not in the real world, but in the heightened world. So, we thought that it could be a lot of fun.
But I would also add that, like, none of our stuff comes from a mean place. If you're looking for, like, kind of gotcha comedy, kind of mean comedy, I think for us, like, we do want to show that everybody can laugh at. And our sense when we watched the first cut of that sketch was like, Diddy's going to love this. It's so silly. It's so funny. It's far-fetched. And we thought, in fact, the story that broke last week, we were like, oh, that kind of changes it a little bit. But, in our sense, our actual feeling after we watched the first cut was like, he's gonna tweak this out. It's so silly because it's so funny. But of course, again, we always try to come from a place of like, even when we're being silly or even making jokes about people, we do try to do it in a way they can still appreciate, they can still be a part of it. We had this whole thing we wrote about, like, what if Morris Day was the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? And it wasn't really spoofing him. There definitely was a sort of a character of him. But also Morris appeared in the episode. He loves that sketch. He actually came back this season. For us, anytime we can interact with classic Black artists, people who really, defined their eras the way Morris was part of what Prince was doing, we want to do that. And it's actually really funny and interesting being Black because most of our heroes are very much alive and not as old as we think they are. Because like all the rap heroes I grew up with, I see them on the street. They're just like in their 50s. You know what I mean? So it's like we have a chance to really still work with people who we grew up loving. And I think, any opportunity we have to do that, we're going to take it.
I'll even add that that Morris Day story about him being the Fresh Prince is kind of based in truth. To hear Morris and other people who know the story tell it, when Quincy Jones originally started working on the idea of a kid plucked from the ghetto and then raised in Beverly Hills, they had originally, thought of Morris Day possibly playing that character when the idea first popped in his head. And then a few years down the line, they were like, oh, what about Will Smith? So that is a story kind of based in truth. And a lot of our stories, like when our charade character starts off playing for this Stevie Nicks type character, a lot of our stories come from the real life stories from the music world that we're like, oh, how do we do that? How do we do the Sherman Showcase version of that? But really, it's just a nerdy music nerd conversation between people like me and Bashir, our friend Questlove, Vic Mensa, who's a nerd,
John Legend,
Fontaine Coleman, who from Little Brother to this show, John Legend. Like, these are guys, we can talk music with them for hours, and then we try to figure out, well, what's the Sherman Showcase sketch that can encapsulate that?
Nice. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hi, Dana Abercrombie, the Coalition. My question for both of you is kind of piggybacking a little bit off the previous question. Can you talk more about the guest stars? Is it we talked about, certain characters are written for certain people. Do you write all of the sketches for someone in mind to play, or is it all just scheduling that comes in?
It's case by case. It really is. There've been some amazing sketches, by the way, that didn't happen this season because various people didn't want to travel during COVID or during the Omicron spike. I mean, I will say that the pandemic definitely had an effect, not just in delaying this season and causing us to rewrite portions of it, but everybody has a different, comfort level, especially earlier this year when we were shooting this. So there's some sketches that quite honestly we didn't feel like we could do unless we could get the ideal cast. There's sometimes that we've written, whether it's for the part that we wrote for Issa Rae this season was specifically for Issa Rae, and if she had said no, we would have probably done a completely different character. But totally. There's some pieces that we write specifically for a person, and others that we will say, there are a couple of different people who can play this part. So if Chance the rapper hits us up and he's like, yo, I'm in LA, then we're like, yo, send him these 3 characters. He can play any 3 of these, But then there are other roles where we're like, if we can't get so and so, let's just do something entirely different.
But even with Issa, there was, because we know her. It was one of those things where there was just some emails going back and forth, like, we love you and we want you on the show. Here's like 3 or 4 areas that we'd like. Which one are you sparking to? And that's something that, again, to his credit, I think we saw Jimmy Fallon do, with his guests, where there were times when people would come on and he'd just get on the phone with them and say, hey, I'm thinking either you could do this sketch with me, or we can do this sketch, or we can do that. And then so they have and so that way the guest is coming really excited, to do this thing that they really had a chance to be a part of. Now, to specifically answer your question, I know Dial has some other names. We have Issa Rae this season. We also have Portia Williams this season. I resisted the Housewives show foolishly for many years. And then once I started watching, I was like, oh, this is great. And so I'm so proud that we got Portia, which is also, really cool, because Diallo's family is kind of old Atlanta history family. And Portia's family obviously is old Atlanta history family. So that was very special actually to have her. But we also have plenty of people like Desi Banks. Michael Blackson came through and blessed us this season. And it's I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, Diallo, but again, we're really grateful that we have these people who love the show and are willing to come and be silly with us. And so, those opportunities are very special. And what's nice is they get to come and have fun and do something that they really enjoy and are proud of. And like we said, and then leave, and we don't take too much of their time up, because we have to shoot our entire season in like a month. So everything is kind of really rolling, which again, as a guest star, they get to come and have fun with us and then, continue kind of what they're doing. John's on the show again this season, of course. Playing a character, we kind of wrote we basically like John Legend is like a really nice person. And we were like, that really doesn't help us comedically, John, that you're nice. Like, that doesn't really serve the show. So our version of John Legend is rather evil, and he just gets a kick out of it because it's totally fake. But stuff like that is always like, it's fun when people want to have fun. And I think they know we're coming from a place of like, hey, let's just have a good time, and not from a place of like, we're going to get you here and make fun of you or anything like that. Yeah.
Hi, Katya Woods, Couple Social on the Philadelphia Tribune. While you said a lot of inspired by your contemporaries, but I see a lot of I'm a 70s kid, so I see a lot of like Soul Train, a lot of the 70s variety shows where they would still give you the behind the scenes look. Can you talk a little bit about some of that inspiring you,
Yeah, I mean, I think going all the way back to when Bashir and I first met, we met at Harvard. We were in an a cappella group. So we've been singing silly songs ever since we first met. There's something really funny about the music of the 60s and the 70s and the 80s before rap sort of becomes the predominant culture, because to sing is to emote and to show emotion. And if that emotion is about, the fact that you prefer the original version of Point Break to the 2015 version of Point Break, well, then there's something really funny about that. You know what I mean? Like, somebody posted that online over the weekend, and people who didn't even know Sherman Showcase were laughing at it. Same with Drop It Low for Jesus. Like, to this day, a lot of people don't know that is a Sherman Showcase song, and yet we love 90s R&B. We love, doing sort of like the R&B song that you don't see coming. And, to a certain extent, the 70s and the 80s, like, that will always be, and 90s R&B, that'll always be sort of peak R&B. Now, I'm happy to say that I feel like we sort of cracked the code on hip hop this season. We have a lot more hip hop songs this season. We have something that sounds fresh out of the Lil Baby, Lil Durk sort of, current hip hop. We have 90s hip hop, which we've been trying to break for a while. We were like, what's our Tribe Called Quest song? What's our big De La Soul, like early 90s posse cut? I think we knocked that out of the park. And shout out to Rashida. We know Rashid's But we have a couple of writers on the show who are such music heads that they can legitimately write an entire song, and it's actually the only issue that me and Bashir will have will be like, is it actually funny enough? Thankfully, we don't try to write funny songs. We try to write songs that remind you of the era that they're supposed to exist in. And they're sort of like the songs that we wish existed already, but didn't. So I feel like whether it's 70s R&B, which we have a lot of, and to Bashir's credit, he pitched at least 2 songs that I think are, immediate classics. One is sort of like sort of an Al Green soul song, from the 70s when black dudes used to talk over the track and be like, "Say, brother, what you doing over there, man?" Like before the song even starts. Like we got one of those kind of songs, and we have songs from many different genres this season.
Jill again. So to kind of stay on the musical tip, as you go across the season and you look out, how do you plan the music that you want to utilize, or how many skits are going to be comprised with original musical elements? Because I'm sure there is, even if you're shooting in a month, that piece probably takes a different type of time or element to put into it. So how do you plan that out when you're looking
Sure,
at
I don't want to take up all the oxygen. So
go ahead, man.
Me, but I always say coming up with a new season of Sherman Showcase is almost more like coming up with the second album or the third album for a group. It's not that we start with the music first, but we have so many ideas going into the room that I can promise you, I have on my laptop right now at least 30 or 40 songs that you won't see on any season of Sherman Showcase. Not because they're not good, but just because we don't have enough time. We're a linear show. We come on cable TV technically. We have to keep it within 20 minutes and 30 seconds. But we've got songs. I mean, hopefully we'll have the chance to do more seasons and more specials. But just recently, somebody looked under my sink and they saw all these grocery bags and they were like, "Damn, you got a lot of grocery bags." And I'm like, because we always, I it goes back to my mom. I always keep my grocery bags, for a rainy day, and sometimes literally for a rainy day. And we wrote a song called "I Got Bags for Days." And sadly, as funny as that song came out in the written form, we just couldn't find a place to place it in this season. We have 8 episodes. How many? We got 6 episodes instead of 8 this season. And I feel like it's just, we had to prioritize our songs. So sadly, that song will have to wait. But yeah, there are so many songs that we write that I'm just like, man, I wish we had time. I wish we could just, go back and just do an album of the songs that did not make the cut. Not because they're not funny, but just because we have a limited amount of time.
But it's also a balance thing. Like, we don't, if we have, can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah, it's also a balance thing. So say we have two songs, they're both great. One's a hip hop song, one's a reggae song. If we already have 4 other hip hop songs this season, even if that hip hop song is better than the reggae song, I do think we're going to try to give the audience a balanced diet of music because we want them in some way to appreciate music the way we do. We appreciate music from all genres. And if you watch the show, we do everything regardless of genre, regardless of era. It's true. The show aesthetically does feel very 70s because it's based on the variety format, which was popularized in the 70s. But I think this sort of special sauce of it is that we really do jokes from all the way back to the 60s to the future. We have episodes where there's whole episodes about something that happens in the future. And so for us musically, it does have to feel like an album where you have a balance. So you have, your love songs, you got your upbeat tracks, you got your militant track, you got your Black Power track. You should sort of give a nice a diet to the audience. We think it helps balance the entire season. And luckily for us, we just have this really great thing when we work with real musicians. Like we don't, most comedy shows, the songs you hear are actually written in the writer room. We know that because we used to do it. And they're focused on the authors, they're focused on being funny. Whereas we are reaching out to people like Dame Funk and Fonte Coleman, and all these great musicians and saying hey, you're a real writer, you're a real musician, let's merge interests and create something special.
Some of my favorite sketches were the ones that have kind of some special effects, bigger sets, all of that stuff going on. Can you talk about what goes into that?
Can I start this one, Dee?
Yep.
I'll just say very quickly that we have turned our limitation into an advantage. You know, we shoot everything on the stage. So if we want to write a sketch that takes place in, you know, say we want to do a sketch about a Western. We love Westerns. Now, even though we shoot in Southern California, we're still not going to drive out to like, you know, Chatsworth or something and go find some dusty town and shoot. We have neither the budget, you know, nor time to do that. But what's beautiful is that we have this sound stage and our brilliant director, Matt Piedmont, who's a visionary, who shares our interests. We're able to say, let's do everything on the stage and let's use the fact we're limited to the stage to force us to be more creative, you know, and that's one of the things that I love. So even like, you know, in this season, by the way, we do stuff. We have like Wes Anderson style movies. We have a whole sci-fi movie. You know, we have all this great stuff that we shot, but it's all limited to the stage. And it forces us to think, well, we can't go outside and get this shot, but what if we built a miniature and then we build a whole miniature set and now it's a little tiny balloon and then we zoom in on the balloon and then it becomes, you know, and I think those types of like things, it gives the show specificity. So now this sketch comedy show also has this thing where it's not just like they shoot sketches where the sketches are supposed to be. Like, no, we shoot everything on the stage and we make the stage change shape and dimension to fit the sketch. But then no matter where one of our sketches is playing in the universe, it always feels like a Sherman Showcase sketch. And I think that has become something that we really lean into.
Yeah, and to that point, you know, again, based on Soul Train, they would do live commercials on the set of Soul Train. And you could tell that they just slid in a wall and put the camera here. It's really, you know, part homage to the inventiveness of Don Cornelius and Soul Train, but also like our chance to use all the film school tricks of the trade that we've picked up along the way. So it's like, oh, if you move the camera like this and you move out the wall like that, you know, like I always say that a good direction in a lot of ways is like being a magician. It's like while you're watching over here, this hand is doing something else that you don't notice. And it's yeah, we're just, at the end of the day, we're just art school nerds.
Thank you. I love it. It's very creative. I like that.
Thank you.
Hello, hi, Dana again. Now I know you had your specials like Juneteenth. I was wondering for season 2, is there going to be any other specials or certain themes that stick out for you?
Absolutely. We have, and I'll just say a couple. We have a whole episode.
Go for it.
We have a whole episode based on fashion. I mean, we were really inspired by Rihanna's fashion show and how she really, I mean, I know we're like the last people who should be inspired by that because we don't make couture clothes. We're silly comedians. But it was cool how she just broke the form and she just was like putting her favorite people in there and it just felt like different. And so even though ours is very different from that, we loved it. So we have a whole episode that's about fashion and the sketches loosely are based around fashion. And so it provided a theme. We have an episode based totally about the 90s. I think it's like, is it 1995? What year is that? With the group, I'm trying to remember the year. I think it might be 95. But there's like a mid 90s episode based on.
Are you talking about The Shrine?
The Shrine, yeah.
Yeah, we're so proud of that. The season finale goes a long way towards both being a special episode of the show because it sort of talks about when Sherman tried to rebrand the show as The Shrine because he saw one episode of MTV's The Grind, and you could actually find The Grind on YouTube. But also it's got some of my favorite songs of the season. It's got a cartoon prepared by, you know, this show is really just an excuse for us to find some of our favorite people doing stuff out in the world and bring them into our world. So we love those Instagram posts that Ace Vane does. So he donated a cartoon of his to the show. And then it also, you might find out at the end of that episode, you know, one of the questions we always get asked is, why does Sherman never age? You know, he's been on the show and he always looks kind of the same. You might get an inkling of an idea why, you know, Sherman never ages, you know? So, you know, again, this is a show that we have a lot of fun with every episode. And I think if you're into special episodes, man, this season has something for you because I think almost every single episode is a special episode. Because
pretty much, yeah.
We have Sherman in Africa, you know.
Oh my God, one of my favorites.
He went live, you know, from Lagos, Nigeria, and you can see what happened, you know, when that happened. And we've got another episode that's set up like an episode of Dateline, but it's actually the Sherman Showcase Awards that took place on a boat. You know, like we saw one episode of Bandersnatch, and so we did Sherman Snatch. And it's supposed to be the interactive episode of Sherman. So, you know, I think every time we come to this TV show, because it's not necessarily following a narrative, even though it kind of is if you're really paying attention. We get to really have fun and sort of fulfill the wish fulfillment that I think a lot of Black creators who don't want to get pigeonholed into telling certain type of stories, we get to tell every kind of story on Sherman Showcase.
Mm-hmm. With everything going on, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. Is there anything that you're seeing, you're like, man, I wish we could have been able to jump off and do something, because there is some stuff that I'm sure, whether it is politics or just, people being interesting onto internet.
Yeah, I mean, first off, we're fans of all that. We watch it all. We talk about it all. We send each other jokes and emails about it. And every now and then we'll do something about that. But I do think for the show, we found more value, and I do believe the show will be more. I think if we try to make it timeless, it will be timeless. If we try not to make it too specific to any specific incident and or person, then I think it helps the show become something that, again, 20, 30, 50 years from now, you can still watch an episode and still get most of the jokes because it's all sort of broadly thematic or specific to something we've created. We create the universe. The other thing to consider, and this is something we, again, noticed when we worked in Jimmy Fallon, is like, you have a sort of like content ecosystem now where you have thousands of internet comedians also watching the news every single day. And I'm gonna tell you what, you're not gonna beat the internet in terms of making jokes or even in some ways doing sketches about what's in the current news cycle. It really behooves us to try as much as we can to chart our own lane. And so for us, again, it's like every now and then, again, if something happens to be timeless or it happens to hit something current eventsy, that's great. But we don't seek it out, because I think, hey, we used to do that. We had our previous gig. And also, again, it's like how to do something that no one will see coming, because everybody's made jokes on TBD, whatever the current, news cycle Twitter thing is. Everybody's made those jokes, but nobody's made this other joke. And for us, it's like, that's the joke we want to go get, the one that nobody's making to help set us apart from the pack.
But I will say, we're watching everybody else's shows, and people are doing some really impressive shows right now. And I
Very
think
funny
that
stuff, yeah.
I think if you watch our show, you'll sort of see sort of a scrapbook of everybody who we like working with. So season 1, we worked with Quincy Jones and Marlon Wayans, Lil Rel, so many people, fast forward Jamel Hill, and then you fast forward to this season, and again, we got to work with Issa and Chance, and even somebody like Paul F. Tompkins, who, I never thought that we would necessarily cross paths, but it was like when we needed somebody to play a bigoted Southern senator, it was like, hey, what about Paul F. Tompkins? And it turned out he was a fan of the show. So, it's just an example of like, there are some more people who I think, honestly, I'd love to work with Anderson .Paak on a song, because I feel like, I heard him do the Blink-182 version of Juice WRLD's Lucid Dreams, and I was like, this is hilarious. That's the kind of stuff that I want to do on Sherman's next year. And don't sleep. Season 3 of Sherman Showcase might be all, funk opera. It might just be one long opera that goes from point A to point B, and it's all narrative. I think never rule out anything when it comes to Sherman Showcase, because we're always, trying to say, what's the most inventive thing that we can do next?
Bashir and Diallo, please keep bringing it back. We love the show. It is so funny. Thank you for your time today, brothers. On behalf of the world's largest group of Black film and TV critics, thank you for watching this edition of AAFCA Roundtables. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
You too.